Let's turn now to Capitol Hill, where Senate Democrats are preparing new legislation that aims to protect reproductive rights ahead of the November elections. The latest bills are part of a package called the Right to IVF Act, which would not only preserve access to the procedure, it would also make it more affordable. At least 13 states have introduced bills that would directly impact whether people can access IVF. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale joins us from around this. Ali, good morning. So first, just remind us how, why, when IVF became this hot-button issue just in these past couple of months, and how this legislation addresses some of the biggest concerns among people who support this procedure or who are trying to access it.
Yeah, Savannah, you're right. This sort of only came up just in the last 6 months or so as an issue that felt urgent, in large part because a court in Alabama at one point ruled that embryos created through IVF should be allowed the same rights as children. That's then something that was touched off in a further political firestorm when, at that point, I asked then candidate Nikki Haley if she supported the court's ruling. She said, in her words, embryos are babies. It then forced the rest of the Republican world to reckon with where they stood on that. Ultimately, most of them fell in with where most of the public is, which is that IVF should not be restricted. There should be less barriers to that kind of reproductive health care. And we've seen across the country, various states try to put in place laws that would make it harder to go at IVF. That's at the state level. At the federal level, now we're watching Congress and specifically Senate Democrats try to make a push around enshrining protections to IVF treatment. That's one of the things that Senate Democrats are going to try to be pushing legislation on this month. And of course, you asked why. Timing really is everything. June is the month where, at the end of it, we will see Senate Democrats and across the country, folks mark the second anniversary of the Dobbs Supreme Court decision. That, of course, means that the United States is officially 2 years post the Roe versus Wade decision that enshrined a baseline protection for abortion across the country. And, of course, we know the ways now in which a patchwork of rules and restrictions have popped up across the country, making seeking care for women that much more difficult.
Yeah, generally, this push, right, by Senate Democrats to put reproductive rights in the spotlight. I'm not sure if why now is too obvious of a question, given what's coming up in November, but what else should we expect to see?
Well, it's why now in June for the reasons I just mentioned, the upcoming Dobbs anniversary, but then also the fact that this is one of the most, and I would argue the most salient issue coming up to November. Abortion, and specifically being post-Roe, is only something that we've seen voted on in a presidential election in theory. Now we're actually watching the first presidential election and widespread elections across the country with Americans knowing that they are without the protections of Roe and watching, frankly, what that means across the country. To that end, Senate Democrats today are going to continue highlighting those stories, both of patients and providers in the Senate Help Committee. That's going to be one of the hearings that they have. Then tomorrow we see them vote on protecting contraception. All of these votes are expected to fail, but at this point, the message is the point, Savannah.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.